The Hangout is on the air. And let's hopefully make sure no feedback. Wait for it. Wait for it. Hi, welcome to Modern Dad Council. I am filling in the big chair of Chris Eichen. I am Tommy Maloney, co-owner of Blending the Family, and today we have Eric Lehman of Game Changer. Say hi, Eric.
Hello, hi, this is Eric.
And Jay Forty of the Greatness Zone.
Hey everyone.
And so far, no feedback. So
So
far.
far, so good.
Great.
We'll talk about that another time. Today's topic is failure. We want to talk about how do you instill failure into our kids and even into our own lives. This conversation started with one of the couples my wife and I mentor, and one of the kids said to the mom, you don't know anything about failure. And she looked at him and said, your dad and I got divorced. That is kind of a failure. And so I don't think the child realized that in our adult lives, in that situation, that we go through failure a lot. But are we not teaching failure? Start off with you, Eric. What do you think about when you with your kids and failure?
Well, I feel like one of the ways that I teach failure is I model it, and I model the other side of it, which is also saying I'm sorry, and so and I think also like living fully into the game changer movement, there's a chance it could fail, and in my heart of hearts, I know it won't, but I'm doing everything in my power to get out of its way and to fail quickly, as quickly as I need to fail in order to get to another layer of the onion that will succeed or will break through. And I guess this is the and I'm glad you shifted to me first, and I hope that I don't derail the original intent of the conversation. But one of the things that I love about diving into the game creation world, or is the gamification of the world, is that there's no environment in the world that is better suited, that better trains failure than the gaming world. And I feel like, parents, including myself, used to roll their eyes. They would say, well, that's not real life. You can lose all your marbles and then just get, respawned. You can get shot in Grand Theft Auto and then, show up a second later, with all of your limbs back on. And so I feel like, my original, hyper realistic intent was a deep failure. And what I mean by that is when I first launched the Game Changer movement, I wanted to rip kids from the screens, from the gaming environment, and that was a failure. Like, that was the wrong thing to do. Now I learned through that failure that the best way to reach kids is through, meet them where they are. And so it took a few iterations of me thinking that I knew best,
Right.
in order, a few failures in advance of this new vision, which now, the universe seems to really want to adopt. So, I have a living, breathing example, and I just went to something called the Finger Lakes Social Entrepreneurship Institute, and one of the workshops within that was specifically highlighting this program called like 1,000 or 100 failures, where all these people are going to go out and model failure quickly. Like this woman who's not in baseball shape is going to try to show up and be on the baseball team, for a day and fail and document it, so that we can break. But I feel like this is such a beautiful topic, and like it just needs way more attention because our helicopter parents nowadays, we're doing our kids a disservice if if we don't let them fail in our presence.
Well, let me
And
stop you there, Eric, because I know that today you have your daughter. What failures have you instilled with them?
I missed, the audio was a little choppy. Can you repeat that?
Well, I was saying to Jay, and that is what failures, because Jay's daughters are older, what failures have they seen, and learned from in their adult life?
Seen from me, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. How have I done a great job of modeling failure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was a guy that got divorced because he came out. So, in lots of definitions of failure, that was kind of like full steam ahead. From a church's perspective, from a family perspective, from a friend perspective, they saw that some of my decisions represented real failure of choice. But part of it, I think, is acknowledging that somebody else's definition of failure isn't necessarily your definition of failure. So for someone to come out and be authentic in a life that they were not before, I think is more success than a failure. But the thinking around ending a marriage was, this is a plus minus event, rather than or this is a minus event, is there possibly a plus to this? And I think it does a couple of things. One is it says that failure is part of life, and that if we hide it and keep it from our kids, then they don't ever realize that it's part of life until it's theirs, and they don't know then how to manage it. The other thing that happens is, just because some loud voice says it's failure doesn't mean it's failure. It means in their prescriptive tone or their view of the world, it's a failure. So the fact that you can start a business and not make a huge amount of money, somebody would say you're a failure, but in that process you discovered some absolute amazing information about yourself and changed some aspect of the world, not in the world's definition of it, and you were quite successful. So the ability to talk the world, to talk about the word failure is exactly what needs to happen. We need to bring it up and talk about it. What is your own sense of when you failed? If I have a kid that got a B on a report card and they think they failed because they used to get A's, but this is a subject that's not their subject and they really struggle with it, and a B is like off the charts, then why are we thinking failure in here? So that there's a couple of different buckets of talking about it. Can we see it in ourselves and honestly own it when we fail? Can we help our kids discern whether the word failure belongs to them or doesn't belong to them just because some loud voice around them said it? And then based on that, I think the only way that we move forward on that is, could we bring it up and talk about it, make it in the open, so that it isn't this hidden and embarrassing thing, but rather something that we all realize. We all do it, we all will do it. There's no reason why we should be embarrassed if it's our turn to have it happen.
One of the things I love listening to on a monthly basis is Success Magazine, and Darren Hardy always has that one question towards the end, and he asks his guests, what is your definition of success? Well, can we talk about, and going back to you, Eric, what is our definition of failure? And I say this because, like Jay was saying, having that definition of failure, maybe too many times, like you were saying, Jay, about a child who gets a B and they normally get A's, in their eyes they failed. However, what do you think, Eric, is the definition of failure, and how do we again bring that up? Again, modeling, but what other ways can we show our kids that it's okay to fail?
Well, I think it's one of these really great questions, and there's two things. Is like, one is failure is feedback, and so if we destigmatize failure, and I think failure is probably the last thing to topple. Like, I think we can destigmatize kind of talking about sexuality. We can destigmatize divorce. We can all these other things, and I don't necessarily believe that divorce is actually failure. If you're not with the right person, you shouldn't, like, there are many instances where staying married is actually failure. So on the flip side, I went to grad school in program evaluation and planning, and we had a joke that said, if at first you don't succeed, change your definition of success. And yeah, so like, I think that's the whole point. Like, there's this, in the research world, there's this idea of operationalizing something. So, we can take a concept and then we can operationalize it, we can test a hypothesis, and then we can determine whether or not that hypothesis rings true. And one of the reasons why I, fought against the academic way of looking at things is that I realized that money pays for research, research pays for outcomes, outcomes are purchased in advance, and so like what we look at changes, so like this spiritual world, like kind of like we can look at anything that happens as failure or success. And I guess that's what I'm really getting at is like the world just is until we add meaning and value to it. So the same things that like when I first told people I was breaking up with my ex, they're like, I'm sorry, and I'm like, I'm not. Like and so whereas sometimes it's almost like, wow, I get to launch, this game changer movement, and people are like, congratulations. And I'm like, wow, like you have no idea what it means that I get to, so like it's all perspective. So I mean, we're just, we're meaning makers, and so for a long, long time, and I think our lizard brain has a lot to do with how we look at success or failure, and I think the other thing is, especially as it relates to the parental relationship, we look at our children's outcomes and we somehow create chords, and we take on their outcomes as some determination of our success or failure as parents. And I think that's the biggest chord that we get to cut in this generation.
You bring up a good point there, Eric. So I want to turn back to you, Jay, because a lot of what you do, Jay, you work with, college-age kids with the Greatness Zone, and, they see success among their peers. They see failure among their peers. So what can you tell us with the kids that you work with in their bubble of failure?
I mean, I think it's kind of what Eric's getting at, that there are some broad statements about what failure is. In college we have A, B, C, D, F. So an F's a failure, a D is probably pretty close to that too. So there are some markers that are accepted as definition of success or failure across the boards, like grades. But I'm finding that this generation, this next generation anyway, is less prescriptive and less defined about what success and failure is. And I'd like to think it's because they're more in tune and they're choosing wiser, but I don't really see that. I think that they just get desensitized to success and failure, particularly while they're in college. So I obviously get kids that are freshmen, sophomore, juniors in college. It's different when you go out to the workplace, and now success and failure may feel more obvious. And short of the grades, maybe some relationship stuff in college, most of it isn't about paying attention to success and failure. I wish a little bit more of it was not success and failure so much as success and choosing success. So I think what's going on with this generation is that they're so distracted from everything going on with their constant connection to the outside world that they haven't labeled things as success or failure. From a professor's standpoint, that's a problem because they'll miss an assignment and not think anything of it. Or they'll see at midterms that they've got an F going on, and they're just realizing what that now means. So they've been disconnected from what some of the markers of success and failure are in certain institutions. I think that's great ground for us to be in because they're not so marked up with life's definitions of success and failure. And then they go out to the workplace and then they get it. So maybe there's something that could happen in the college age where we get to redefine in our minds what success and failure might be.
But let me interrupt you here, Jay. In your experience, do you think that maybe if they had learned more failure at a younger age, that they wouldn't be stressed out, so to speak, at midterms, or like you were saying, they missed assignments and they don't understand the consequences?
Maybe if they learned about failure differently. It isn't that you have to go through a lot of it. I think that whatever you go through, you have to do it wisely. And I think that's a parent's role, to guide a kid through failure, as they would guide a kid through success. Like Eric said, failure is feedback. It's just information. This didn't work. So doing it a lot, I don't think, is a requirement, but doing it wisely is. Because you can get completely wiped out and check out of things because you feel like a failure all the time, because no one ever helped you manage the value of it. The benefit of learning through a mistake, or realizing that everything you touch doesn't turn to gold. That if you do it a lot, you can get really wiped out. But if you do it with a little bit of guidance, I think you can then see it for what it really is, which is feedback about the quality of your choices. Does that make sense?
You make a great point there about choices and consequences. So, in your world, Eric, dealing with, kids and families, with the Game Changer movement and trying to get, the violent video games out of their hands, one of the things is choices, and not seeing the consequences, in their future. What do you have to say about, that really bizarre question?
Well, let's make it a question, and basically, say, like, do I believe that kids currently have choices, or what does it mean? And this is a very interesting, tender topic, and so what I've learned, and it was hard for me to learn this, but what changed my game and showed me the error in my early way was that I learned that youth are spending 10,000 hours between birth and age 21 in the gaming space. So for me to create a movement that tried to get kids away from screens, although we know as 40-somethings or 50-somethings that that was what our childhood was like. Our childhood was like walking out the door in the morning and coming home when we heard a dinner bell or whatever. That's not the experience that our kids are having. So that's not necessarily a choice that resonates with them for the most part. That being said, the other fact that I just learned recently is that 89% of the games that kids currently play that are the most popular, that contain the communities that they're also seeking, contain some aspect of violence. And that's where we get to focus in the Game Changer movement, is creating a new line of options and finding ways to incentivize the youth to be part of the process for creating those options, because I think that's really where choice comes in. Even if and I think that's what I love so much about what the Game Changer movement is really about, is we are a with movement, not a for movement. So we don't work for kids, we work with kids, and that's where choice comes in, and that's where agency comes in, and I think that's the beautiful buzzword right now, is like, how do kids experience agency and know that they actually have a choice? If 89% of what they have a choice from contains violence, is that really a choice? No. But if they have an opportunity to help be part of the new alternative choice creation games, then that's choice, that's agency. And in a way, because the process is part of the outcome, there is no failure, you know. So like we can make a crap game together and still have it be a success, you know, because we created it together. So so I guess that's I mean, maybe that's a cop out for me to say, but you know, I think we get to figure out if what we're defining as success is answering the question, do kids now feel like they have a choice? And the answer is yes. Cool, success. But if we go through what we're doing and we don't create any new choices for them, then we failed. So rather than did we create an amazing game, you know, that has all the bells and whistles of Grand Theft Auto and just doesn't kill people, like that might be setting us up for failure, you know. So,
yeah, I don't see many kids buying that game.
Right.
Or adults. Jay, you've talked to us several times about coming from the big Italian family. What memories do you have sitting around the dinner table of failure?
I think we were typical for the time period that failure generally got you a punishment, so you would stop doing failure, whatever that was, failure to do your tasks, failure to treat your brother right, failure to you know, empty the dishwasher or do the dishes or something. So I think, you know, I think we're a little bit growing up as like, you know, a little bit of a cowering dog, that we're a little afraid of failure. I know because growing up in my household, you know, a spanking or some kind of significant punishment could happen from failure. Bad grades got you punished. Disrespect got you punished. So I don't, though I have to admit, as when we were younger, it wasn't unusual for us to get a good spanking if we needed the spanking from a failure. But as we got older, the spankings gave ways to lectures. And I remember saying to my dad once, just take your belt and hit me, but don't talk to me. When the real value of it was in the talking. That was the ability to finally have a discussion about what failure, the consequence of failure was. So initially we started out, I think, much more in the way that he grew up, which was this behavior gets this kind of physical outcome. And then I think he realized that he didn't like it and none of us really benefit from it. All it did was scare everybody and didn't build these sustainable relationships. If you've just been spanked, trust me, I am not giving you a hug good night. So, and I think that was part of what shifted him to realize that, you know, what if we talked about this instead so that we could intellectually understand, you know, what happened and why it happened. So failure wasn't unusual in our house. There were a lot of us, so it was going on all the time. We were a little intimidated to get caught in failure because we knew, you know, what it would result in. So I think instead of using it wisely, we were afraid of it. We were either going to get a lecture of our lives or the spanking of our lives, and neither one was high on my list of what to get done today.
So what did you learn from that experience that you've taken as a dad into your daughter's lives?
Yeah, don't do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't do that. It's that you can go the other way and be this, you know, this overly milquetoast parent as well that can, having had it, said I will never do that to my kids, or understanding that, you know, how do we share the consequence of your actions is really what it is. And when you have failed at something, meaning you've let someone down or something that was expected didn't happen, it's a really easy conversation to have. It does not need to be adversarial. Think in the workplace as well. I mean, if you're failed on something, how would you talk to your employee about a failure without thinking that you have to fire them? You know, that there are ranges of discussion around things that don't work as expected. And, you know, back to Eric's comment at the beginning, failure is feedback. This didn't work. Something that was expected didn't happen. So the next question is, what do you want to do about it? And I think what I shifted to early on in my parenting was, so what do you want to do about that? The one thing I think I did do well as a parent was I asked a lot of questions when I had points of something that needed correcting, because I'm a true pacifist. I'm not someone, I couldn't hit someone. I don't think if I spank the kids at all, it's the back of the hand as they're running past you. You know, It was never what I got, which was drop your shorts down and the belt would get you. But I know that was part of the time period. And I know we're probably a little bit more apprehensive about doing that kind of thing at a failure. But I think what is important here is not that we dismiss the failure, but we actually call attention to it. But there are civil and significant and intellectual and meaningful ways of drawing attention to it, rather than just venting your frustration on a kid who didn't do what you wanted them to do. And I think the spanking part came from a lot of frustrations of parents, rather than let me intentionally pay attention and with intention think about what it is that I want to do to change this kid's behavior. I think it was, I'm just mad, and here's how I show you that I'm mad.
Yeah, you talk about change behavior. I remember, the past couple of years of parent-teacher conferences with my son, and the teacher always comes back with the biggest issue he has is his handwriting. And it was really funny because I kind of torture the kids. Being in the car, I make them listen to, success and motivation CDs. And one of the success CDs, they had interviewed Robert Hirschbeck from, widely known from a Shark Tank. And he was talking about that exact topic about how his son's handwriting is just atrocious. And so my son's ears perked up, and I'm driving, and I can see him going, "See, Dad, I'm not the only one." And I said, "I agree. I totally agree that your handwriting is just like your dad's handwriting. It makes a doctor's handwriting look brilliant and beautiful." And so I don't look at his handwriting as a failure. I look at his handwriting as, like you were talking earlier, Jay, about, you know what? Yeah, that's a weakness. I'm not going to expound on his weakness. He can type. That kid types better than I can. And so that's one of the things where I don't have a problem with, my son's handwriting being really bad. The only time I can see it as a not a strong suit is when we have kids write thank you cards and thank you letters. But guess what? They can still type it in the end.
Yeah, I think it's understanding the severity of the failure. I mean, that's part of it. Does this punishment or adjustment make sense for the infraction? And many times parents have a one-size-fits-all. If whatever has happened, here's my reaction to it. And it isn't a response, it's a reaction. And most of that we find, anyway, in doing some of the work we do with parents, is that's something going on in the parent's head more than in the kid's head. And just with a little bit of coaching to a parent, we can shift them out of thinking that the default mechanism has to be what they do. There is not a one-size-fits-all parenting response. This failure at this moment requires you to be in this moment, paying attention to this event with this kid. Some kids only need just a little bit of a stern talking to. Others just need a hug, because the reason why it happened is they're already way more significant or severe with themselves than we ever would be. And so could we be wise enough to choose in this moment how we should look at failure, acknowledge whether it's truly failure, and is it a significant failure? If you took the car when you weren't supposed to and got yourself in an accident, yeah, I think this one's not going to be just a simple little conversation. But, based on all the other things that get parents upset at kids because of some failure, what if we were able to just take a breath fast enough in order to say, where is the context in this, and what should I do here so this turns into a teachable moment?
Eric, I'm going to piggyback on that. What teachable moments have you had with your kids on your own failures?
Well, I feel like all of it is just getting a new language around it, and so and so much. I mean, just right now I've got the Game Changer movement on my head and heart, so like I'll just throw out from that. But I mean, and also like I had a recent relationship that ended in a way that I wasn't prepared for, and so that looks like a failure, and kind of my own personal process is finding a way to get to gratitude for all the kind of the things that come in and out of my life. I mean, and this is kind of like spanning out. So like, there was a way I thought the Game Changer was going to look last year going into this year, and that changed, and externally or internally, I internalized that for a while as failure, and I made promises to my kids that didn't really come true as a result of that, that kind of dynamic. And then just yesterday we received a promise, the Game Changer movement received a promise from someone that, where the energy is totally in full alignment, and it is, like I like to say, a hell yes, like this is in the right direction. So, but that being said, I'm not gonna go crazy making promises yet, until the check clears or shows up, So, I mean, I guess the teachable moments are first for me to internalize and to say, oh wow, I want to model integrity, and I want to model integrity based on what I know I can control, if anything, and so I'd rather model what is, in a way, still being hopeful about what could be, but just bringing the reality of the situation rather than just the pie in the sky things. Everything looks great, and my energy wants to share. Oh, like we're gonna be traveling the world, like changing the game, and we are. It's just we don't exactly know how that's going to look. So teachable moments, like all of them come from within. All of them come from me first. So like if I can't model being gentle with myself, then I can't help my kids be gentle with themselves. So, it requires taking myself way less seriously than I've ever taken myself before, even though I'm on a journey and a mission that is more urgent than ever before. So it's just like, it's a very interesting, I don't want to say tightrope walk, but like, it's a very interesting dynamic, because the stakes have never been higher, and yet it's never been a better time to take myself less seriously, because living your dream can be fun. So how do I model that? How do I create teachable moments around that? And maybe teachable moment, like I always do, I change the words. So, maybe it's learnable moments, So, what do my kids see, rather than what words do I say? Because I've learned time and time again, like we could say things till we're blue in the face, but it's what they see that lands, So how do we create learnable moments? And that.
You're right, Eric, that we do tend to take ourselves a little way too seriously. And so there are times where we do have to still be a kid within a kid, showing our kids it's okay to be silly.
Mm-hmm.
With just a few moments left here, I want to pass over to Jay. Jay, number one, thank you for showing up today. Eric, thank you also for showing up. Real quickly, what is something that we can pass along to our listeners today about failure? And also, how do they get a hold of Mr. J40?
Well, you can always find me at Jay, at thegreatnesszone.com. So you can always get me there. A takeaway for me is be your own guide about what failure is. Don't let the world don't use the world's definitions of failure, because our lives are personal and unique, and what might be acceptable by the world is unacceptable by you, or the other way around. And so the biggest thing for each of us is to decide for ourselves what that is, and as a parent is to be present enough to each kid to know what that is for them, so that you don't impose your standard on a child that just doesn't share that. Maybe I know there are some standards that we do, but the uniqueness about performance or grades or identity, I think, belong in the hands of the person. So those two things. Have your own definition of success and failure, knowing that failure happens, and as a parent, show up present to your kids to know that for them and guide them through the moments of failure so they use them well.
Eric, same. What one takeaway, and also how do parents get a hold of you as well?
Well, I just feel like the word embrace shows up. Like, let's embrace failure. Let's fail quickly. Let's model it. Let's laugh at it. Let's learn from it. Let's grow from it. And if you want to learn way more about failure, reach out to me and at eric@dream-catalyst.org, or you can find out a little bit more about the Game Changer retreats that we're creating and crowdfunding around at bit.ly/Game Changer Retreats. So that's what's alive and hot right now. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about screwing up.
All right. That's a great way of putting it. I want to say thank you to Jay and Eric. I want to thank you, the listeners, for please keep leaving your comments. A big shout out to Chris Eichen letting me hang out in my own chair in the comfort of my own little home office here, of getting to run the Modern Dad Council. Thank you again, both of you gentlemen. Please leave comments. Please visit these guys at their website. I always feel like when I talk to these guys that I'm in a Mensa meeting and I'm in the wrong room. Thanks again, all you Modern Dad Council guys and gals. Have a great rest of your week. Bye now.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Wait for it.